what you have in the screen right now, and this is very relevant to our neck of the woods here. What you have here right now, it's a weed-killing robot, right? This is a robot that right now, it's not affordable when you compare it to the cost of a undocumented migrant working in the fields, but the moment you try to raise this above $12 per hour, the machine makes sense. And weed killing is easy. It's the low-hanging fruit of the field. This is a grape picker robot. Right, developed in France. Anybody who's in the wine industry who depends on this very complex task, which is taking the grape, cutting it, selecting it, etc., it's now at the target of transformation the same way we saw it for many other fields. If your job can be automated, if it has a repeatable component, it'll be. Right? The forces are there, and unless we try to regulate against it, and even in that case, other nations might not do the same, and then we would be on a disadvantage against their products and their performance. The reality is that science and technology has reached a point in which many of the things that humans could do can now be done by computers better. Right? And at the same time, we're discovering a world in which wealth can be created cheaper by more people with access to manufacturing capability, for example, that was not available before. Like I want to think, for example, 3D printers. You might have heard about it, these objects where you can literally print a vase or a piece of hardware for your tools, etc. Anybody can do it now for $400. Distribution channels like Etsy. If anybody of you have ever used Etsy.com, it's basically an Amazon for handcrafted stuff, right? Think of your favorite antiquities fair or market. Well, that's Etsy.com permanently 365 days. So it's an important channel for people to do things differently. News just 2 days ago, Chinese factory replaces 90% of human workers with robots. Production rises 20 to 50%, defects drop by 80%. Untold story of this whole debate that we're having right now is that most of the companies that leave the United States towards a different market, they don't actually leave the United States the way we think. It's not like Ford suddenly decides to pack all their machines and carry them and now bring them back to China and start doing the exact same thing that they were doing before. What's Ford or any other company would do when they go to China or Mexico or any other place, it's mostly extract themselves from union agreements that they used to have that would allow them to change the processes that they couldn't before. And one thing that you will notice that when they open their factory somewhere else, they leave their machines behind. They sell them for scrap metal or something like that. They'll come down and reduce the amount of labor required, and they'll change their processes in a way so they don't create the same amount of jobs that come out. And this is one issue regarding that, right? So we heard about the horse, we know it there. The other thing that I want to mention is that these are tipping point-like events, right? This is not something that gives us a warning with a relatively limited rate of change. Instead, what often happens is that you are on a state that is fairly comfortable, and suddenly there is a cliff in which 10 or 20% of people find themselves unemployed. Here is the untold story in our current debate. This is not about the future. Most of our current jobs that have been lost to technology, not to trade. In fact, this is what the output of manufacturing in the United States of America looks today, is the red line on top. It's going up. Manufacturing output in America has been going up since the 1980s. What has changed at the same time is that manufacturing jobs have been going down. We produce more output with less input, at least with less labor input. If you ever gone to Fremont and visited the Tesla factory there, one of the most American automobile brands, 97% of their product is built there, but they have the lowest hiring requirements of any auto manufacturing company. In no small part because they remove the combustion engine, right? They build electric cars, and 60% of the labor associated to building a car goes to the powertrain. So as you get rid of the combustion engine, the other thing that you get rid of is the requirements for labor. It's easier to build what is basically a skateboard of batteries with a bunch of computers plugged. Right? Is this as bad as it sounds? Well, that depends, right? If you're building cars, it is. And that's what we're seeing. A lot of this, how did he call it, the Luddite horses? Well, a lot of the tension that we're feeling right now is the fear that it's coming from the disappearance of jobs that seem to feel safe and were covered by a fair amount of generous benefits. through the automation process. It means that we have to think about what it means to have suddenly a lot of products being built, but maybe have no population who can afford them, right? Because they don't have jobs to pay for them. So there is an imbalance here. Things can be produced cheaper than ever before, but at the same time, we are on a real danger of having less and less of a population with disposable income capable of supporting a industrialized society lifestyle, right? This is a contradiction that many people have been trying to study what to do. Enter the so-called UBI, Universal Basic Income, right? I don't know if you ever heard the topic. Universal Basic Income has been one of those ideas or experimental thought processes, thought experiments. Anybody or anything that you've heard about UBI that makes claims about its effectiveness or lack of is lying to you, including myself today. Right? And it's lying to you because UBI is one of those big economic experiments for which we don't have enough data right now to know what will happen. UBI means, very basically, it means that today we have a base income already. That base income is zero. Right? The worst you can do is zero. In the United States, other nations are not like that. But in the United States, our base income is zero. UBI says, no, let's raise the bar, right? Let's find a way in which people can have a minimum income associated. Now, a typical example, although it has a lot of caveats, but it's good as I thought, it's Social Security, right? Social Security says that from a certain age, under certain rules, if you contributed through a certain way, you'll get this income for the rest of your life, right? It's a covenant, it's an agreement that you have with the state. It worked, it created the industrialized society of today. It's been regarded as one of the most successful public policies, both by conservatives and liberals, right? Although many conservative politicians still would like to get rid of it in many places. Now, other nations on the planet have gone beyond Social Security, right? The typical examples are the Scandinavian nations, Germany, France, where there is a social net above the number zero associated to people who make no income. Hartz IV in Germany, for example. If you have nothing, you at least have 400 euros a month, right? There is a little element of subsidiarity built into that system. UBI, the whole idea is a very basic one. Tax the robots and use the robots to pay for the living quality of life of people. And if that sounds radical or socialist, it actually is not. Hayek, the economist that it's lauded by Milton Friedman, spoke in favor of UBI. Milton Friedman himself talked about the validity of it. What is the issue? Well, the first issue is what you see here, right? What you're seeing in the chart is a value question, right? When Americans are asked, how important for you is your job, work ahead and to get ahead in life? Look where America is, right? The United States gives 73% of value. Most people say that's a highly important thing for them. Look at Indonesia, look at India, look even at Germany, 49, right? Most nations around the planet, mostly because of the associated changes that we're talking about, most nations in Europe now have decreased or devalued to a certain point the image of work as a way of identifying yourself for who you are, right? The whole joie de vivre as a concept in France, right? The whole thing about I work to live, I don't live to work, kind of, all these memes actually represent that idea, right? In America, it's still funny how the first thing that somebody will ask you is your name, the second thing they'll ask you is what do you do? Right? So it's that second question that says how important that is, and for good reason, right? We call it the Protestant work ethic. We've given many names to it, and in many ways serve well the United States of America. At the same time, it makes the United States of America particularly ill-prepared to the idea of a population that might not all be capable of working the way we think about it. We think of them slackers, lazy people, etc.
What will you do with your time?
I've got a job in Ripon. I said I'll start tomorrow.
A job? You do know I mean to involve you in the running of the estate.
Oh, don't worry. There are plenty of hours in the day. And of course I'll have the weekend.
What is a weekend?
I love that scene because it's very telling. Until the Industrial Revolution, the aristocrats, the aristocracy was not supposed to work. We've been here before. We've been before in a place in which a small elite, the one, or whatever you want to call it, actually saw the performance of a job as detrimental to their reputation, right? A job, right? Well, wait, don't you know that you're part of the state now? Well, that's because they had the state, right? They had Downton Abbey, right? So they had the building with the properties, and it is with the rise of the bourgeoisie, right, and the industrial revolution that created a new class of ways of people who got access to wealth through a different mechanism, right, which was their personal labor. Right? It's the rise of the lawyers and the businessmen and that class of individuals that today we assume is the only way in which we can imagine the job market. Mount Vernon for George Washington, Mount Pleasant for Madison, Monticello for Jefferson, right? Those are their states. Those are the states in which they got all the income they needed in order to think about the American Revolution. And of course, they could do that because slavery was taking the role of the production of labor. The Brits didn't have slaves at that time, but the conditions that people had were very similar to what you would consider a slave-owning society, right? And still today, when we see it in the developing world, we see very wealthy individuals that pay very low levels of salaries to their peasants and can afford a fairly comfortable life by doing so. So this idea of a society in which people don't work and therefore there are a bunch of slackers that will be watching TV, right? It's not representative to the things we know that people do when they don't have to work. Especially if you think about some of the jobs that we're talking about. We're talking about cashier at Walmart, right? Or cherry picking, right? Jobs that are very noble in their objectives in order to sustain a family and open opportunities to your children. But they're certainly not very fulfilling from the point of view of the human endeavor. Right? In many ways, they are a new kind of alienating individuals into very repetitive jobs that limit their capacity to do something else. The example that I like to give is, imagine that the next Steve Jobs or the next Elon Musk, it's a girl in Oaxaca or Michoacan who has to take a very crappy job to pay for the medicines of her mother, and therefore we have lost the opportunity of having that individual producing things that we cannot even imagine. Right? Creativity is a low probability, high consequence event. You might need 90 Syrian immigrants to get one Steve Jobs, right? So, son of immigrants, son of Syrian immigrants. You never know which one is the one that will give you that. So the question here is, what would happen the day people who are right now alienated from the creative experience get to be freed from that? And we have a name for that people who get an income and don't have to work for it. We call it retirees. Right? So now it is an unfair example because one could argue that retirees actually retire comfortably because they had a strong work ethic to begin with. But here's the question, right? Do retirees become a burden to society? That's not the case. That's not what the data tells us, right? In many ways, they either acquire new activities in which they participate actively in their society in ways that they couldn't do before, because before they had to worry about putting food on their table, and they can become more engaged politically or socially. They go to high-value jobs that are not necessarily high-paying jobs, like art, like poetry, yeah, but also other things like creation. And this is actually the untold second generation of entrepreneurs in America, right? We have the idea of the entrepreneur, like the 20-year-old in Silicon Valley that does X, Y, Z, and that is true. But the second generation of founders in America is actually people who was able to retire from a previous job and now can take the risk associated to starting a new venture. So we know, and I'm assuming that some of them actually become slackers, right? So I don't know. I haven't met one yet. I haven't met yet a retiree that does nothing productive with their life. They define productive as meaningful. So we know that a society being freed from having to work a 9-to-5 job is not necessarily a negative thing. The thing is how it will happen. Franklin is said to be the very first person who formally retire and express that as a concept. And a lot of his experiments actually came later, right? So as an innovator, we saw it doing it later. What you see there is a very unuseful graphic, but I like to show it. It's the GDP of the world from the year 10,000 to the year 2007, I think, or something like that. What you will see is that there's basically no change until very, very recently. What you see, let me zoom it, but even in that case, what you see is that it's this very long tail, this very long hockey stick where nothing changed. And what you see there in the 1800s is the steam engine and therefore the first industrial revolution. Look how different the world looks before and after. And the reason why I want to mention this to you today as almost a conclusion of what I'm trying to say here is that when we think about, for example, this whole idea of creating a society where taxation suddenly looks very different, it's easy to say we wouldn't have the money right now. And that is true, right? Under current conditions, we wouldn't have the money to make a shift the one that UBI advocates are talking about. But of course, they are not considering a current model, right? It would have been impossible to have the kind of state that we have today in the 1200s, right? Which the 1200s were very similar to the 1300s and the 1400s. What we're talking here is the arrival of a new series of abundance-based technologies that will change dramatically not only the way we see things right now, but what comes in the future. And that's what I'm telling you, that I'm talking about a kind of economic singularity. We don't know what this will look like. I dare anybody to imagine what it would mean to bring somebody from the 1400s and bring it to the society today. And then bring somebody else from the same amount of time, from period of time, ask them to describe yourself 2017 and challenge them to see if they could even imagine what a world where not everybody has to work in order to feed themselves and famines are all over the place and polio is killing half the population of the planet and women die 1 of 3 times that they give birth, right? What would a world like that would look like? So I have a child, he's 5 months old right now, he's very noisy. He keeps us awake, and my wife, I have discovered a bigger admiration for my wife than ever before, even though I already admired it before. So what I would say here is that this is the world in which he will be coming into the labor market. Right? This is the world. I don't know how fast it will be. I don't know if it'll happen by the time he comes into labor or the transition will be taking place. But as a father, I asked myself, what would I tell him? And here are a few things that I've been thinking of that I think show not only my personal inclination as a father to try to protect him from what it is a very promising but also very challenging future, unknowable future. I would say first that in the short term, in the transition period, there'll be, Mark Anderson says, only 2 kinds of jobs, right? There'll be the jobs in which you are telling a computer what to do, and there'll be the jobs in which a computer is telling you what to do. And you want to be the first one, right? So you want a job in which you have the right set of skills so you can be multiplied, augmented by a technological capability. You want to be the one telling the computer what to do, right? Those are high value added jobs, require a skill set for which we are not preparing kids right now, and will be needed in the foreseeable future if you don't want to have a job in which you have an earbud in your ear and a headphone, and you have a robotic voice telling you now go left, now go right, which is something that we already see today. You saw chess on that video, and you know when Kasparov was defeated by Deep Blue, the IBM computer that made it clear that now chess was not anymore one of those skills that we could say humans will always do it better by computers. He did something very interesting. Well, first of all, he threw a tantrum for like 1.5 years, and secondly, he opened a new league of chess players. That new league is very interesting because unlike the traditional chess games where it's a human versus a human, he said you can come however you want. You can come and let your computer play, you can be a human, and that league, the interesting thing is that what happened is that the best teams or the best players are not computers and are not humans. The best players are humans empowered by computers. So people come with their own algorithms and they play, and this mix of computer and human, it's a very interesting one. So, the players become enhanced. So, second advice that I would give to my son, and also that makes great public policy, would be make sure that you are crafting your skill set, especially for new people, but also for other people who are already employed, in a way that you can multiply yourself by the use of computer technology, not that you are adversarial to a computer. If you're in a position in which a computer will make you obsolete, you're dead in the water. Number 3 is self-development and lifetime learning, and this goes to the whole cycle of how a life is supposed to be lived. We think that, or we've been sold on the idea that you first go to college and then get a job and work for a while, grow your career, then retire and have fun, right? That's kind of the cycle. The insurance companies are based on that model, etc. Things are changing, and we're already seeing it. Some people go work for 3 years, make a ton of money if they have the right skills, then retire for a year and a half, travel to Indonesia, have fun, then come back and get another job, enjoy it for a while, then go and learn a new skill because you need now to learn a new. So the education, retirement, work cycle is broken, and it's broken forever, right? Because of this. The question is, how can you get into it? High-skilled people today enjoy more freedom than ever before. The rest of us are actually more limited. So one of the important things is to follow that skill set development in a way that you feel comfortable jumping throughout your career. Enjoy the ride. I mean, there's things that are about to come that we cannot even imagine, right? It's a place, it's common in the light of new technologies to become pessimistic and get that Luddite component of us scare us because of the jump, because of how it looks. We don't know what's coming. We don't know what exponential growth looks like because that's its nature. It moves so fast that our chimp brains are just not capable of following it to its ultimate consequences. That's Paris as imagined by a bunch of urbanists as what the future might look like if we... and that's fine, and that's good to think about it. Make it green, make it clean. But there's more than that, right? This is how we would used to think about the future. This is NASA's 1960s view of the space colonies. And what I'm trying to say with this is, remember that hockey stick that we saw with the Industrial Revolution. Remember my question when I told you, try to get somebody from the 1400s to explain to you or imagine what would be today. That's us today, right? We don't know what the future would look like, and it might be bright and great if we make it happen, but we should be aware of it. We need to start thinking about this sooner than later. We are seeing some of the first ripple effects of these issues with movements like Brexit, of the victory of now President Trump in the United States of America, people afraid of losing their jobs or wanting those manufacturing jobs to come back. This is a Luddite movement in many ways. It's a fear of a technology that is already coming, represented in many other ways, right? The fear of immigrants or the fear of what's coming from international trade. But those jobs and those fear associated with those loss of jobs are signs of things to come. This is just the canary on the coal mine. At the same time, more opportunities than ever are opening for those who know how to harness them. And our public policy better make a capacity of harnessing that is exponential change fairly soon. Thank you so much for the time, and we can open questions and answers.